Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Refold Podcast. My name is Clayton, and today I'm joined by Mike Campbell, polyglot and CEO of Glossika. For those of you who don't already know, Glossika is a language learning company that has put out dictionaries, sentence banks, and currently they have an AI platform. It's a web app and a smartphone app. Mike Campbell himself is an accomplished polyglot, and he's actually someone who inspired me when I was a teenager and first getting into languages. All right. Hello, everyone, and hello, Mike.
Hello.
So, Mike, do you want to tell us who you are? What is your relationship with languages and the language learning community?
Yes, I'm the founder of Glossika, and that's Glossika. And Glossika is a Greek word that generally just means language or linguistics. It's got a nice ring to it, so I kind of liked it when choosing a name way back when. And so everything we do is related to language. We have a platform where content is created. We try to get that made in a lot of different languages. And what the platform does is it's mostly a tech platform. So most of the people that work at Glossika are developers. They're not necessarily language enthusiasts or polyglots, though we do have a handful on our team of polyglots and language enthusiasts, but not necessarily developers. So it's kind of a melding of the two groups working together and trying to build great solutions for a language learning community. And also we work on data sets and a little bit of AI in the background. So a lot of our data sets are related to, like text processing and audio processing, things like that. So we have a philosophy that you can actually acquire a language through exposure and practice, kind of like going to the gym. If as a gym user myself, I believe that if I go to the gym and I do a certain number of reps in a given month, I'm going to start seeing results. Month after month, those results are going to start showing. And I have the proof to show it. So it's kind of like, if you just show up day after day and you do your reps, you're going to see results. Now, I believe that with language learning, that constant exposure, that constant practice, and what we like to say, is doing the reps is actually going to take you to the next level. A lot of people experience plateaus. I experience plateaus in language learning. And so breaking through those plateaus just means that thinking about, what are the kinds of things that are going to push me outside of my comfort zone. So when we have people sign up on Glossika, I think one of the very first important things to do is to say, set a goal. And normally we like to set that goal of 25,000 reps. Try to get through 25,000 spoken sentences within the next, 3 to 5 months. Sometimes it takes longer. We don't recommend doing it faster than that, just because, the brain needs some time to kind of absorb. Just like if I were to go to the gym and do 1,000 reps on one machine all at once, I'm probably going to hurt myself. And so, you have to pace yourself, kind of like running a marathon. Learning a language is very much like running a marathon. You start off running too fast, you're gonna burn out really quick. So we believe that if you're, I've had a lot of students come from other places of learning, like classroom environments, and they get to the point where I've met people that have memorized the whole English dictionary, but are unable to speak English. Now, I have to admit, I have kind of the same problem in some languages for myself. I know a lot of words in that language, but I'm very slow to be able to open my mouth and communicate. But I think that there's different kinds of language learning. So Luca Lampariello and Arguelles, they both mentioned that there's sort of a philological side of learning language where, like a language like Sanskrit or Latin or ancient Greek, you may learn everything about these languages, all the vocabulary, you can read books, and it's primarily for that pleasure of reading. It's not necessarily a productive use of the language where you're actually speaking. So I think that there's different goals for everybody. It depends if you want to use the language as you want to consume media, or whether you want to actually use it when you get out and travel and meet people. So what I found is that the former is not actually all that hard. If you want to memorize a whole dictionary, okay, so be it. If you want to memorize a lot of things, but the actual production of the language is what I've always suffered and suffered through that experience. How can I make this a better experience for people? What if it was as simple as just show up at the gym every day, do these reps, and after a few months, you'll be speaking this language? I wish it were that simple. And so that's been kind of the goal of this whole time of creating Glossika as a brand is, show up and do your reps. And after a certain amount of time, that compounds. And you'll start to develop this ability to understand and respond naturally in conversation. So it really just comes down to having that self-discipline and being able to show up every day. So Glossika really is a platform where we bring, we have a backend system called Glossika Viva, where native speakers can come on, create the content in their own languages, record that content. And then we have a revenue sharing model so that those sentences now appear for the Glossika users through a subscription-based system. And that's what Glossika is. So there's very little actual linguistic work that goes on in the company. We're just mainly just developing this platform. But my background is specifically with all of the linguistics, research, and that's what I love. And we've got a couple of members on the team that are pretty strong with that as well. So
the words reps came up a whole bunch. And when we think of reps, a lot of people think of like you said, going to the gym, doing your squats, and those are your reps. What exactly are users repping when they are doing their Glossika reps? You mentioned sentences.
Yes. Okay. So, well, first of all, what we've been striving to do with Glossika is, if you go to the gym, you'll notice that there's a lot of different machines in the gym. There's actually one machine that is pretty interesting in the gym, and it usually stands on it has a vertical on two sides and usually a bar over the top. I'm sorry?
The Smith machine?
I don't know what the machines are called. I don't even use the gym in English, so I wouldn't be able to tell you any gym vocabulary in English because I've just never used a gym in English.
Taiwan for a long time now at this point.
Yeah, so I don't even know what to call it in other languages. I just show up and do it. Anyway, this machine, I can describe what it looks like. It's got pulleys. You can attach all kinds of things to the side. Pull down, you can push down, you can pull down, you can grab both ends like this and pull them inward like this, and then you can also do pull-ups in the middle. It's sort of like there's 100 different exercises you can do on this one machine. If I were to buy one and put it in my house, that's what I would buy, because you don't need a lot of different machines. You can just do a whole body workout on one machine. And I like to think of Glossika as the same thing as, what if we can build this machine that's sort of like an all-purpose workout? And so when it comes to the user, yourself, myself, and everybody else, we approach that machine differently. Like there's certain things that I like to do on that machine that you may not like to do, but there are things that you like to do that I don't like to do. So I think, what we're trying to do is there's no one exact correct way. I mean, there's sometimes you need to do some of this and some of that. And so there's ways that you can switch it around. So we like to be able to provide all of the tools available to the users to do what they want to do and how they want to use the machine. You're not going to be using everything that's available in every time or every session that you do with the Glossika workout. So I can kind of describe my own workout with that in a few minutes. But to answer your question though, like what is a rep? So if I'm on a machine at the gym and I just kind of like do this really flimsy movement, well, I'm not focused. I'm not clenched in the core. I'm not like doing a real rep, like all the way through and all the way back. So what am I actually counting? Are you counting your reps? Are you this is what we'd say you're cheating. Okay, I did 10 reps on that. Boom, 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 boom. Okay, but you kind of half-assed it. So is that, how are you counting your reps? So the second thing we want to look at is with languages in particular, the kind of goal that we're trying to get towards with language is being able to say a full phrase. And sometimes that's a sentence, a complete thought. That might just be a collocation, like you've got a verb and noun pair. So you've got something that goes together and there's some sort of grammar or word order that's connecting those two things together or multiple things together. And so when you do that rep, and I'm also a musician. I love to play the piano, and I think that there's a lot of things that tie in together with this. In that, if I'm playing a piece of music, and there's a tough part here, and there's a tough part here, am I linking them together? I might play the tough part 10 times. I'll do 10 reps on that, and I'll link it to the first note of the next section. But then I'll stop, and I'll make sure that I have that carry over, that linkage up to that point, and then I'll practice the next part. So there's some parallels that we can use with language learning is that you may want to practice shorter sentences and do mini reps with them before you start working with longer sentences. And so the idea of a rep is, are you actually getting through that and you're focused and you're doing it? Now, what is the kind of practice you're doing? Are you just are you doing a dictation practice and you're just trying to type out what you hear? Maybe that's what's important to you. It's not how I personally use it, but I'm more focused on the productive side, which is, okay, can I actually repeat this sentence that I heard? And can I say it like the native speaker? So if I hear a sentence, am I able to repeat the whole thing? Am I able to parse and hear all of the words that were said at speed without slowing it down? In fact, I like to speed up mine in my settings because I just don't have the time. I'd rather do everything at double speed, but Glossika doesn't offer a double speed. We only offer up to like 1.25 speed. So I've told my team, hey, can we increase the speed on this? And they said, well, it just gets really hard. I'm like, yeah, exactly. That's what I want. They're like, yeah, but no user's actually going to use it. Well, I'll use it.
It's interesting that you mentioned that you don't do the dictation. So Glossika AI, the system offers a dictation mode where you type what you hear, and you have to transcribe it. And you mentioned that you sort of do the chorusing or the shadowing. And what's interesting is this is totally different from how I use Glossika. I love to use Glossika as sort of graded input. When I start a language, I know there's going to be anywhere from 3 to 10,000 sentences in the language. And I start a language, I use Glossika, and I put the audio on, and I pace around, sort of like Dr. Argaius. He likes to pace around. And I pace around, and I try and do several hours a day, about 2 hours a day of Glossika. I did it with Filipino, which is my best foreign language. I did Glossika. I did 2 hours a day. And at that, it was like 50 sentence chunks at that time, a little bit different. But the Glossika AI does something similar. And I don't output with it, But some people do, like you do. You use it as output practice for shadowing. And some people really like copy work. They love dictation. They love transcription. So the cool thing about Glossika is what you're saying is that you can use it any way. Like any way you want to use it, it will fit. It fits easily into most language learning programs.
Yeah, that's true. I mean, there are a lot of things that Glossika doesn't do. It's not a a complete package. Like you would say, well, it has grammar explanations or it has like specific kinds of exercises. It doesn't do a lot of that. Glossika is specifically one kind of training, which is specifically training on can you understand and can you actually produce these sentences. So what I found, the reason why I wanted to create this product to begin with was because I wanted something that did this for myself. I wanted to solve my own obstacle and problem here. So, and like you said, I mean, you have your way of using it, which is completely different than my way of using it. And we provide those tools because neither of those methods is better than the other. It just depends on what do you personally find is more beneficial for yourself. And the thing is, I'm going to say something quite controversial here, is that I don't think that writing systems have anything to do with language at all. I come from the school of linguistics.
For sure. I would totally
agree.
In
linguistics, there's one thing that I like to say is that writing systems are a lo-fi, kind of like translating from Chinese.
Representation pizza, or symbol.
What do we say? It's a lo-fi representation of spoken language, and even then, with a lot of languages, it's mainly just conveying ideas, and so a lot of written material that you'll find in English, in Chinese, other languages, Arabic, people don't actually talk like that. I mean, most of the stuff that I read in the literature or in the scientific literature or linguistics literature, most people that have a hard time actually producing a sentence and sounding that competent in a language. I mean, it's like if you were to say these sentences out loud, you'd sound like you're a professor or you're from a different planet. So people aren't born talking like this.
This reminds me of a video you made one time. You said something like, this has probably been 10 years ago. You said most people only use their L1 at like a B2 level. I think it was in reference to maybe a minority language you were studying, right? Because there are not college dictations and stuff and college lectures in this language. For the majority of the world's languages, they use it for haggling and shopping and at home, but they're not writing mathematical dissertations in the language. And I think that's what you're alluding to here.
I think people have heard me say that a number of times. And so I've gotten a lot of irate comments online from that, especially if you go to a place like Reddit, which is always on fire. But I think somewhere on Reddit, somebody said, was calling me out and saying, well, CEFR has nothing to do with native ability. But what I'm referring to in this case is that when we learn a foreign language and you're rating it with a CEFR, A1, A2, B1, and B2, we're kind of rating, it's not just your proficiency in the language, but also how much of the language you know. So the kind of vocabulary that you encounter when you're learning at the B2, the C1 or C2 levels tend to become more and more professional and very niche related vocabulary. And so that vocabulary itself oftentimes doesn't even exist in smaller languages that have not historically been written down. They're mostly an oral tradition language. Even in languages, even in large languages like Tagalog or Cebuano, it's still going to be the same. You just don't have a lot of literature written down in those languages. I mean, try going to Manila and buying a book. I mean, a novel, any book written in Tagalog or Cebuano for that matter. It's virtually impossible. I mean, I have to go around and ask and ask and ask just to get books.
Right.
Now I have some books now on my bookshelf, some novels and comics and stuff written in Tagalog. But it's not easy. I mean, you really have to ask around to get them. And a lot of them are just kind of like romance novels. I'm looking at them.
They are, yes. They call them pocket books. And I always tell people I've got Stockholm syndrome. I got quite good at Tagalog by reading, and most of it was reading romance novels. But I can relate to you mentioning that these words are not used. There's something called academic Tagalog, and it's sort of in a state of disarray. Some people Hispanicize English words to make them sound more Tagalog.
Now it's not even Tagalog. Now we're talking Filipino, because Filipinos.
Oh yeah.
I mean, like technically, it's different than Tagalog. I mean, if you're talking about academic Tagalog, I think you have to start calling it Filipino. Because it's got a lot of English and Spanish, right?
Occasionally, people will come in and they'll try to make like neologisms, like new words. But I want to say that most people end up mixing English or Spanish into their Tagalog when they enter these higher registers. If you ever download an academic PDF in Tagalog, it's going to have a whole bunch of English words, new words that have never been used outside of that one publication, or it's going to have an attempt at Hispanicizing English words. Sometimes they call this salitang shukoy, and a shukoy is like a merman. It's a merman, and they call it that because, like, the word for a boxer in Tagalog is boxingero. So boxing is an English word, and ero, that morpheme, is a Spanish morpheme, like a boxinger. But boxingero is not a real Spanish word. It's not a real English word. It's a shukoy word. It's like a merman, not real human, not real fish. And I can totally relate to what you said. It happens a lot in these languages where the upper domains tend to be in, like, English. You see it with Hindi. You see it with Filipino, with Tagalog, where a lot of people are not using Tagalog for, like you said, writing literature or writing dissertations. They're competing with other languages, like they're competing with English and stuff. When you get to those higher registers of the language, I can relate to that.
Yeah, and I think it might be hard to get your hands on a Tagalog dictionary, but I think there's a good parallel you can draw. If you Indonesian dictionaries aren't that hard to come across, but if you open up an Indonesian dictionary, of course I'm talking about the paper version here, but I'm from the old century. So if you open up a paper dictionary, or you can download one online or something, if you just browse, and I love browsing through dictionaries, so internet versions aren't all that great. So if you browse through an Indonesian dictionary, every single word that you see that looks and it's quite similar to the English, it's a foreign borrowing. These words are not Austronesian. They were adopted in Indonesian is basically like Filipino. It's the national standard, a created language that took in bits and pieces from here and there from all over the country. And so kind of like how Filipino is. And there's a lot of debates behind those languages in the government. But anyway, the whole point here is that, I've been thinking about like how if you're going to modernize and standardize Aborigine languages, they lack all this vocabulary. I mean, what do you call a camel in an Aborigine language spoken on an island, a tropical island that has never seen a camel before, or even a zebra, or these are just like animals that exist in other countries that people have never seen. There's no vocabulary that's passed down from the ancient proto-language. And so you go look at an Indonesian dictionary. Oh, what do they use in Indonesian? Oh, they just use the English word, and they spell it with Indonesian spelling. What is communication? Oh, komunikasi. Oh, okay. So we just borrow that word. In Taiwan, the Aborigine languages are more likely to borrow the word from Chinese. But the same thing goes. It's like, well, how do you modernize these languages? Well, you just have to do a lot of borrowing. The Formosan languages actually have a lot of old borrowings from Japanese. For example, baseball is called yakyu, and it's a very popular sport in Taiwan. So, from Amis to several of the other languages, you'll come across a bunch of Japanese word. Kyokai is a church, for example, which is a common word used in their communities. So,
interesting. That's very interesting. And you brought up the Aboriginal languages. I know that in the past you've worked with them and studied them. What did you do when you were working with the Aboriginal languages of Taiwan, which are, distant cousins to Tagalog and to Indonesian?
Yeah, so I oftentimes get this question of, why would I spend the time, researching or looking at these languages? I mean, they're so edge case and fringe, and nobody really speaks them anymore. What's the point? But actually, in my mind, I mean, this language could be it could be Guarani or Navajo, or it could be Piraha. It could be Wolof, it could be Fulani, it could be any language from any family in the world, and if it's presented to me, I would be interested. I'd be interested to investigate, figure, what's going on with this language. Is there something that I can discover and learn from this language? Is there something syntactically, or maybe morphologically? Maybe there's something interesting. Like you dig around and you come up with treasure. And for a linguist, oftentimes that's just discovering, a language that has some documentation. I wonder what I can dig up in here. What's special about this language? What other thing does humanity have that we use as a method of communication? So if you go to like WALS, WALS, the website that has the World Atlas of Language Structures, I guess it's the what it's called. You can find all of the things laid out in what languages use. Like, does this language have ergativity? It'll list out all of the ergative languages and put a dot on the map showing you all of the ergative languages and the accusative languages. And that's fascinating. It's like, I didn't know that there were so many ergative languages in that area. And sometimes you can see it geographically, and you can look at it from other typological perspectives. And so that's very fascinating. So my interest in Formosan Aborigine languages is not more or less than my interest in Uralic or Dravidian or Bantoid. So, that being said, if it's a spoken human language, I haven't really gotten into sign languages yet, but I tend to use it a lot in my speaking. If it's a spoken human language, I'm probably very interested in it and curious. So I've always maintained a very high level of curiosity about languages, language structures, and comparing them, and what can I learn from it? So the Formosan languages, they just happen to be literally in my backyard. So, going out and visiting people and seeing the human side of things. It's not just something you look up in a paper online or in a book in the library, but actually going out there to meet people, watch their festivals, the dancing and the singing, and some of the ceremonies they have, attending a church service. I mean, a lot of these things build a lot more of the human side of the language learning, and lets you experience different aspects of their way of life, going to dinner with them and how they eat, how they share food. And, there's just so many things that you can learn that you can't get from just reading a book. So I think that, wow, this opportunity is right here in my backyard. I mean, why would I pass up on that opportunity to go and visit? Of course, being respectful, and I'm a white guy, a foreigner, and I'm just here to visit. I'm not going to step on anybody's toes. I'm going to stand by the side. I'll ask occasional questions about the language. I'm kind of curious who can actually count to 10 in the language anymore. How many people are actually quite good in the language? And sometimes they'll point me out. Oh, there's that one guy over there. You can talk to him. He knows stuff about the language. And so anyway, you kind of get to meet some people and chat with people. And I do have the experience of learning these languages. I've learned like 3 of them, I would say, to a more advanced level, and I mean where I could actually do quite a bit conversationally, and actually read texts and translate texts, and even write texts. But the years have gone by since I've done that, and so I think that my my level of my grasp on the languages may have slipped over time. But I
your
think that,
output muscle has atrophied.
yeah, it's the output muscle has atrophied. But I think that, I have a lot of books on my bookshelf, and I sometimes get these annual literature things that they put together. They'll have like a bunch of Formosan literature that they publish every year, and I'll sometimes go through and read them and say, okay, here's some new words I haven't seen in one of these languages, and curious, whether they're in the dictionaries or not. And I'll do some lookup, and I'll read through some of the stories and stuff just to kind of keep abreast. But it's not something that I'll probably keep up for a long time. It was just a really great experience.
So on the polyglot side of Mike, I know that you're very familiar with the Sinitic languages, which tend to be, well, not even just the Sinitic languages, I'll say the Sinosphere languages. So the languages of China and to some degree, like Japan. Yeah.
Yeah, when you said Sinitic, I thought you said Semitic. So Semitic is the Arab and Hebrew, but Sinitic, right. For the listeners who may have
Sinitic, Sinitic.
It's the Sino. It's the Latin base for Chinese, Sinitic, or what we can call the Sino-Tibetan languages. Yes. And
they tend to be, well, at least Chinese proper. So like, Mandarin and Southern, Minnan, things like that. They tend to be very analytic. They tend to have lexical tone. And the native Taiwanese languages, the Formosan languages, tend to have kind of this agglutinative structure, lots of prefixes and infixes and circumfixes and suffixes. And the grammar is very different. That must be an interesting sort of clash because they're very different languages. The Formosan languages are functionally very different than, say, Mandarin or Minnan. So when it comes to your personal output ability, do you find that you handle the sort of the Chinese languages better than some of these Aboriginal languages because the grammar is so different? Or what has your personal experience been having learned languages from both families?
Well, when I speak a language like Thao, I feel like there's things in the language that feel like English. For example, I've been taken, I've been taking. Those different endings on the English verb, I feel like they present themselves in the language in Thao as well. So almost in a similar way, like you have this sort of N ending on words. So I feel like I'm kind of borrowing a little bit from the active passive, but it's not entirely active passive in a language like Thao because it is ergative in some ways. And it's, like you have in Tagalog, it's an agent focus or object focus, or patient focus. So it's it kind of feels like, that active passive thing that we have in English, but you get that verbal agreement. And in some way, what I really love about, learning these languages from distant families is that you kind of learn new things about the way you speak your own language. For example, in English, like what if when I speak English, it's not actually an active passive dichotomy? What if I'm just putting focus on something else in my sentence, and then I'm changing the verb ending to an N, kind of like what you do in Tagalog or the Formosan languages. Maybe that's, who knows, like maybe just learn a new way of looking at how you speak your own language. I actually, there's some linguists out there like Laurent Sagart, it's a French name, Sagart. And I've met him in person, a very interesting guy, and he's researched a lot about Austric as a macro family. And I would go so far as to say that I believe that Indo-European, the Austric macro family, and even Turkic and Uralic all belong to some even larger macro family. This is why I'm so interested in learning these languages from all over the place, because I start to see these connections, like even between English or European, general European and Chinese, I can find about 1,000 words and roots that apparently are through history are somehow related. Like the English word for deer, which goes back into Indo-European as meaning a spirit or an animal. But in Chinese, you have the root shou. And in pinyin, that's spelled S-H-O-U. It's kind of a complicated character, but it's got a canine or dog radical on the right side of the character. But that character, if you look at the ancient historical pronunciation of the word, it almost matches up with the Indo-European pronunciation. I'm just wondering, hey, maybe those two words are related somehow. We don't have the proof in linguistic science. You can't draw out the historical, reflexes in a systematic way through. You don't have enough data to prove that these linkages exist. But when you learn these languages, you can feel it inside you. You can feel like, man, we're all speaking like dialects of the same macro family language. It's so cool. It's a really cool feeling. So when it comes to Austric, like what is included in Austric? So what I feel is that like Sino-Tibetan is a little bit further off, probably an older type of a family. And then below that, you have other branches. Like you have the Austroasiatic languages, which are Vietnamese and Cambodian, the main ones. And then you have the Tai-Kadai languages and the Austronesian languages, which are sort of like sister families with each other. And so
I believe in the Austro-Tai hypothesis. A
so,
lot of, like, the word for chicken in Tagalog is manok, which, if you look at the Thai word for bird, it's nook. I don't know the tone, but I am a believer in Austro-Tai.
Okay.
I think that they're somehow related.
Yeah, and not only that, we've got a lot of words that we can map across the Austronesian with Thai. Now, I've spent the last the year learning Thai, mostly on Glossika, doing my reps, and at the same time, I've been learning another language spoken in. I'm not going to mention it. It's in a new family for me, and so it's kind of a challenge for myself. But the point is that I found that since Thai is in a new family for me, I found that learning the Thai language has been a lot easier and faster. And I can create the internal dialogue already in Thai. And I can do conversations in real life with people in probably a third of the time that it's taken me to acquire this other language that I've been doing the same amount of effort in, same amount of work in, but it's a new language family for me. And what I found is that, like, I just want to say deep down inside of me, Thai is Sino-Tibetan, or it's related. It's just like I'm not even in a different family. I'm learning a language in the same family. There's different words, like there's just different words, but we have that in Southern Min as well. There's just different words for things.
The homeland for the.
Sorry, go ahead.
The homeland for the Thai languages is actually in China, right? So like Thailand was settled by people who were they moved in southern migrations out. And you see this in the numbers. I remember looking at the Thai numbers, and I'm like, I think number 3 for them is like san. And I'm like, that's directly from Chinese.
Well, okay, so the numbers are different. The numbers are actually borrowings in a lot of the cases. They're borrowings from early and mid and late modern Mandarin. So we're talking about in the last 2,000 years. There are some numbers that have evolved over time, and I would say the number 5, ha, has evolved from an ancient root. And so you'll also find this ha as pronounced pya in some of the Miao Yao and Zhuang and other Tai-Kadai languages in Southeast, some of the smaller languages in peninsular Southeast Asia. So you have this pya, you have ya, you also have pnga, and then you get in Vietnam and Cambodia, you get padam and you get panam, or you just drop the p and you get nam in Vietnamese. And so that p actually induces a what we'd call a palatal change on the vowels. So you get pdam can actually become pima, and so that pima over time can also become lima. And so lima is your Austronesian, your link into Austronesian, where you get lima going down through most of the languages. So I would say that lima and pnam and nam and pia and ha and nga in actually in Sino-Tibetan it's actually pinga in the ancient language. So, and if you add an S in there and you get pansqua, then you get the Indo-European. So you get pansqua, which becomes penque and cinque and pende and finfe and five. So you get five and you get lima to actually be kind of from the same root. That's from my own observation. I'm not using any sort of linguistic science here to prove anything. I'm just saying, hey, looks like we all speak the same reflexes of the same macro family, which is kind of cool. But with the Thai, I was watching a video recently of this woman in China, and she was she speaks several languages like Persian and Arabic. She's kind of a polyglot, and it turns out that she's from Guangxi province in southern China, which is a very minority dense area of China. So in Guangxi province, because of all of the minorities, there's a little bit of Pinghua, northern and southern Pinghua spoken there, and a little bit of Yue, which is the main language that Cantonese belongs to, is also spoken in Guangxi in the border regions towards Guangdong province. But most of that province, because of all the minorities, they actually speak Mandarin as their lingua franca. So she was saying in one of the videos, I was just watching, curious to see what she's talking about, and she said, "Oh, in my language in Zhuang, to eat," she was just doing some basic Mandarin stuff. She was saying, "Oh, to eat is actually, we would say "gen lao," and I listened to that. And I said, "Oh, that's Thai." And I went and opened up my Zhuang dictionary, because I've got one right here on my bookshelf, a really big fat one. If you want to see it, I'll grab it. But it's
sure.
This Zhuang.
Yeah,
I'm sorry.
Oh no, this is just fascinating because you mentioned Guangxi and Zhuang and Pinghua, which is really cool. I would love to see Pinghua offered on Glossika because it's a Sinitic language that's mostly spoken by non-Han Chinese people, native to Guangxi. That's just fascinating. I'm totally fanboying right now. I'm very happy. This has been one of the coolest podcasts ever.
Let me say another very controversial thing here, though. Is and a lot of people are okay. So I think that a lot of your listeners are probably polyglots or people who are trying to achieve that goal of being able to master, learn, or understand, or maybe even speak multiple languages throughout their life. And here's a concept that I would like to share with you guys: is that I believe that if you're going to start on a new language family and you want to speak probably the main language of that family really well, in this case, it might be Chinese for the Sino-Tibetan languages, or at the other end of the spectrum, you have Burmese, another national language, but at the other end of the language family. So for me, Burmese is sort of like a different language family, but I'd have to go in and actually learn it really well. I'd probably discover it's probably not as far away as Thai, because I'm feeling like Thai is pretty close to Chinese. So anyway, the point that I'm making here is that if you go in and if you want to learn the main language of that language family really well, but you also have intention to learn some other peripheral languages over time, for example, I think it would be really cool to learn Hebrew, Amharic, and Arabic, over time. I might not learn those until I'm older, but or maybe in the Turkic language family, I'd like to maybe learn Tatar and Kazakh and Turkish. So Turkish would be your number one for that language family. Arabic might be the number one for the other language family. So I have this new theory about approaching it, because if you think about how native speakers are exposed to media and to this mass broadcasting in the major language family, the major language of that language family, what you'll find is that people who grew up from birth speaking the number one major language, let's call it Turkish or Mandarin, okay? Growing up, they will get some exposure to some other, let's call them dialects or peripheral languages, whatever you want to call them. Like a Turkish person be like, oh yeah, I've heard Azerbaijani, don't understand a word. But the Azerbaijani person will almost understand 100% of Turkish. I'm sorry?
The Azerbaijani person, because they speak the peripheral language, they're going to be exposed to all the cool media, all of the translated stuff, all of the dubs that are in Turkish. So the reverse is that they do learn to understand.
So what I'm saying is that if you start in a new language family, learn the smaller language first. It may not have as great, as many resources, but I mean, that's something we're trying to solve here at Glossika anyway. But if you learn the smaller language, it may not even have a writing system. And it doesn't matter because, my goal with Glossika is, can we actually build a language training program that does not require a writing system?
I would love to see that. Because I think the writing system,
it comes over time. I'm sorry?
I would love to see that. So with Glossika, you provide a transcript in the native script, if it exists. You also have a couple of romanization systems and the IPA, the International Phonetic Alphabet. But I think what would be really cool with Glossika and how it works and it periodically shows you things, I would love to see it for signed languages. If you could bring video into it and you'd have someone signing a whole sentence in American Sign Language or French Sign Language, that would be awesome.
But, the idea crosses many people's minds all the time.
Yeah, it would be awesome. And I think if there's one platform for it, Glossika would lend itself to it because, for sure. And I think our idea about language is similar, like my personal idea and yours. And I find myself frequently referring people to your master dictionary of the the Sinitic languages and the Sino-Xenic languages. You've got this master dictionary totally free on your site. And I tell people, go look at the Wikipedia art, because a lot of people who come to Refold and they're like, I want to learn Korean. A lot of them also want to learn Japanese and Chinese. It tends to be like CJK and CJKV, like Chinese, Mandarin, maybe Cantonese, Japanese, Korean, and Vietnamese. They tend to attract a certain type of person, and they want to branch out. And I'm always like, learn the sound correspondences. Learn how, when this was borrowed from Middle Chinese into Vietnamese, how it changes, and then you can easily extrapolate. And I think I think that your dictionary is really good for that. I wish more people would use it. It's totally free on your site.
Yes, it's called the Chinese Character 10 Language Dictionary. If you just give me a moment, I pull it off the bookshelf.
For sure.
All right, so I'm back. All right, so that's the Zhuang dictionary I was telling you about. Get the light on that. And as you can see here, it's also in English. So if you don't know Chinese.
Yes, it says, Zhuang Han Ying something. My Mandarin's awful.
Yes, you got it right. That's right. Can you get the rest of it?
Perfect. Zhuang Han Ying Cidian.
Cidian. Yeah, that's right.
Perfect.
And then I have all my own notes in here because the way they spell the words are with the tones are with letters at the end of the word. So there's an explanation there. There's an explanation in English somewhere around here. And I have my own notes written in the column here in IPA.
Nice. I think I've seen that with like the Hmong languages. They use numbers at the start of the word, or letters at the start of the word for tone.
Yeah, most of the languages in the region that are now spelled in the with the Latin alphabet are going to use a J or a Q or an X or something that doesn't really have any meaning in their pronunciation system, or like a V, and they'll just attach it onto the word. Mostly it's at the end of the word. I don't know of any that does it at the beginning of the word, but there might be, yeah. And then this one, the 10 language dictionary, I've only got like a couple copies left here because we don't print them anymore. But I think we were giving them out at the one of the polyglot conferences a few years ago. But what that has in there is it'll have one character as a head word, and then so it'll have the ancient Chinese rhyme group, which kind of tells you where this word came from, its tone class, and then I'll show you what the pronunciation is in Taiwanese, which is Southern Min. Also Eastern Min, which is Fuzhou language, Yueyu, which is Cantonese, standard Cantonese as in Hong Kong, Hakka, so the Hakka that is spoken in like the standard in Taiwan, which is similar to Meixian or Meizhou in Guangdong province. The Mandarin pronunciation, you got the Korean. So does this one actually have, funny. Okay, so this one right here is pronounced chun in Mandarin. So in Hakka it's pronounced zun. I'm sorry, it's pronounced jun in Mandarin, and then in the Korean it's pronounced sun, and then in Japanese it's pronounced jun or shun, depending on when it was borrowed into the language. So Japanese will have kind of a voiced variant, which is go-on, and the non-voiced variant, the kan-on,
like
because they were borrowed into the language at different
like
points of time.
Joe for up, for on or above, like Shang in Mandarin, Joe, like Jozu.
Yeah. And then
because
I
Middle
also
Chinese
have here
had voicing, right?
Yes. So there's also some the native Japanese is also included in here. So you got kudo and nengoro for this particular word. Now, normally those native pronunciations are just sort of like a description of what it means it's not an official reading of the character. But Vietnamese also has the same thing. Like in Vietnamese, you'll get a reading for a character that is not actually used in the main language in the way people speak from day to day, but they'll have a native pronunciation, and they'll oftentimes have 5 or 6 different native pronunciations in the Vietnamese that are kind of similar. Like in Vietnamese, you can write a D also with a bar through it. So without the bar, it's pronounced like a Z, Z. And with the bar, you pronounce it as D, like the English D, but it's a little bit ingressive, so D. And so in Vietnamese, you'll sometimes get that dichotomy, and where the borrowing from Chinese is with a Z, but then in the native way they pronounce it, and they'll change a little bit of the vowel might change a little bit. But these are things that you kind of have to build an ear for and get used to it, and you can't just analyze it analytically. It's not really that clear cut. You just have to kind of acquire the language and kind of immerse yourself in how it.
And that's what Refold is all about. Refold, a lot of our methodology is based on Dr. Krashen and his input hypothesis. We also really like Paul Nation. He's a linguist out of New Zealand who has done a lot of study on how many reps it takes. So he says that it takes 12 reps on average to learn a word. And we believe, input reps. But I, at a personal level, am all for learning about sound changes. That way, if you do decide, hey, I've learned Japanese, now I want to learn Mandarin, you start learning those sound correspondencies. And I think that your 10 language dictionary is a really good resource for that, actually. Because like you said, it's got the native Japanese word, it's got the go on, the can on, so on and so forth, all of these borrowed words. It's got the Vietnamese. Shout out to your Vietnamese program. It's one of the only programs I've seen to fully use Chu Nom, which is the old sort of Chinese style writing that they used prior to the last century.
We do have a table in the dictionary. You can download the PDF for free, of course. That table will show you the sound correspondences between Korean and Japanese from the original Chinese. And so that there's a little bit of, I think the dictionary itself, you may not use a whole lot, but if you just go through and read through those tables at the beginning content of the book, if you read through that several times, or you come back and review it every month, you're going to get to know that like the back of your hand. It's going to be really familiar with you, for you. And so, yeah, just getting back to this idea of learning a language in a new family. I mean, if I were to learn like the Filipino languages, I'd probably start with something like Cebuano, and then move on to Tagalog later with just exposure to the language. Because I think that with Cebuano, there's so many people to talk to, especially here where I live. When I visit the Philippines, it's like, oh, you're Visayan, so like everybody's speaking a version of Cebuano everywhere. And so if you're going to learn Tagalog eventually, I mean, you don't even have to work at it. You don't even have to try hard. It's just like there's Tagalog everywhere in the media and everything, and then it's mixed in with English, and like, okay, there's kind of like this sort of Filipino mishmash. But you'll eventually understand both versions. So like when I speak Chinese, I speak with an obvious Taiwanese accent. Now, I don't hear an accent because when I speak and I live in this environment and I'm using Taiwanese Mandarin on a daily basis, it's like my radio is tuned in to the exact frequency and I don't hear any accent at all. As soon as I hear some sort of different accent in Chinese, it's just like, oh, that sounds very communist.
So, you're touching on something here that I've referred to as speaker identity. I am from a rural area, the middle of nowhere, the backwoods in the South, and I think it's totally fine. You have been living in Taiwan for a long time now. That is your life. You've adopted this sort of Taiwanese persona in your speech because you're pro-Taiwan, you live there, you're integrated into the community, and you sound Taiwanese. And to me, that's totally fine. If you want to learn Canadian English because you're moving to Canada, or you moved to Canada and you want to say sorry in a boat, that's totally fine. That's your speaker identity. You're allowed to have a speaker identity in your second language. That's sort of my hot take.
This is a really important thing for people, especially if you are a teenager, if you're 15 years old or you're 20 years old, and you are interested in learning Chinese, or you're interested in learning Turkish, whatever it is. But maybe you have this lifelong goal. It's like, I want to learn all the Turkic languages, or I want to learn all of the Chinese languages. Well, what I would suggest is, once you kind of understand how Chinese works, why don't you go and learn the Cantonese? Why don't you go learn the Taiwanese or the Hakka? They're going to be a little bit harder because there's less resources available. But it's not that hard to actually find people who speak these languages and to practice with. And the thing is that when you learn those languages well, you're always going to have them for life. And then you learn Mandarin on top of it as a national standard, and you're going to have an identity. You're going to say, I identify as a Taiwanese speaker or as a Cantonese speaker. And so you're going to have that. And so, when I learned Mandarin, I did it the other way around. I learned the big language first. And I've spent a lifetime trying to master Taiwanese, but it's just like, if I had made the Taiwanese my number one in the very beginning, and it would be the first thing that comes out of my mouth every time I open my mouth, I'd probably have a lot more friends and a lot more interesting conversations with people. But the first thing that comes out of my mouth is just standard Mandarin. And so to actually kind of fall back and default to Taiwanese is actually a mental effort and a physical effort, because for a lot of people, even my close friends, they grow up in families speaking Taiwanese with the parents. And I've been at family gatherings with friends and all kinds of people, and I can communicate and I can partake in these conversations in Taiwanese. And then when we turn to each other and we talk, we're back in Mandarin again. And I just think it's so absurd because we didn't start the relationship on that foundation of like, okay, whenever we meet and see each other, we're speaking Taiwanese. And I think it's kind of a shame that that these languages kind of take a back seat to everything else, because I think we could probably run our whole company in Taiwanese. Some people may object, but like I would say that 90% of the people in our company on the team speaks Taiwanese, except for the foreigners who are not Taiwanese. But I think it's interesting to say that if you actually learn the peripheral language, eventually you're going to understand and know the standard language over time quite naturally, and you'll default to that more often than not. But you'll always have that base. So, for example, you have your accent from the South. You have that place where you can always go back to. I mean, in your native language, but maybe if you're talking about like a new language where you're learning, where do you want to feel like an adoptee to? Where do you want to feel a physical and emotional connection to? For me, that's Taiwan. So when I speak Chinese, I can easily change my accent to mainland Chinese accent if I'm in Shanghai or Beijing or other places. I can mask my Taiwanese accent immediately. I change the prosody, the intonation of the words I'm using, and nobody would know any different. As soon as I'm back in Taiwan, boom, I click it back on. It's just a code switch. If I had learned Mandarin not using the Taiwan standard, I would never be able to do that. I'd never be able to switch into Taiwanese Mandarin. And so it's almost like I have that code switching ability with Mandarin, just because I have a base, a foundation in which I learned with that radio frequency just perfectly. I can tune into that frequency so well. And the thing is, with standard Mandarin, there's nothing impressive about it. Everybody learns it as a foreign language in China for the most part. Even the people in Henan and Sichuan province are speaking standard Mandarin, and they're having to switch all their tones and pronunciation to a standard to be able to understand. So everybody speaks it as sort of like this, like Italian was 100 years ago. It kind of still is. A lot of these languages are invented standard languages. None of these languages ever existed in history.
Well,
like a standard
even
language
more
in
moderately. Even more
Sorry?
moderately, as a Southerner, I code switch. So in my dialect, might could is a totally valid statement. Like I could say, Mike could go to the night market tonight. Might be able to go to the night market in standard English. I code switch. I do not join a meeting at work and get in Zoom and say, hey guys, how are y'all? I don't do that because, again, there's a stigma. But yeah, code switching is very useful and very impressive to me. Now, Mike, we are at time. But before we go, what is your parting advice? Your parting advice for a would-be language learner or a user of Glossika. What's your parting advice? Well,
coming back to language learning on Glossika, what I believe is that there's two kinds of ways of learning where people like to have everything in context. For example, this learning by stories and things like this. And then there's a Glossika method, which is almost like everything is out of context. I kind of wanted to address this in the next time I had an interview anyway. So the reason why I like getting sort of these random sentences on Glossika is that it forces me to not have a crutch and not have any help from the sentence that I just did. Approach this new sentence completely out of the air. What is this new thing? And the way that I use Glossika is I like to, it differs from my first rep to later reps, but the way that I use it is I'm not interested in the writing system, because I think that, like the major language and the media, I'm going to pick up the writing system over time once I get really good with the language. So I like to do everything Romanized to begin with. I was different when I was much younger as a teenager. I was like, I was really into the writing systems. Got to learn Chinese writing. Okay, whatever. So my life has changed since then. And I know all the Chinese writing system now, so it's no big deal. So the point is that I like to approach language by the sounds of the language. What I found is that there are some universals in language, like dark things usually end words that are dark or meaning dark things. They usually end with the letter M in a lot of languages. I don't know. How do you say dark in
gloom,
Tagalog?
Glum.
It
You would
ends with
say
an M?
dilim in Tagalog. It ends with an M. It's
It ends with an M?
Dilim. Yeah,
Okay.
Dilim would be the root word for
Now,
dark.
see, if you look it up in Latvian, it's tum, T-U-M. They add an ending on the word like with an S, but it's basically the same. And in Russian, you say tiemna, tiem, if you just look at the root. In German, you also have the M ending, but they add a K onto it. So it's actually dum, but it becomes dunk, dunkel. And ul just means a little bit. So, and that carries over into the English with the D and the K. But you can see that this phenomenon of the sound phenomenon is so much more interesting to me than just the actual writing system. Because if you focus on the sounds and the reflexes and how the sounds have changed over time, you'll find that you already know a lot of the vocabulary of this language. You just need to open your mind to how the sounds have shifted over time, and you'll find that, wow, I'm picking up this language by sound alone, because I believe that humans, we this goes back to the Kiki Boba effect. If I show you a round thing and I show you a sharp thing, like this round thing, you're going to say, is this a BB or a boba or a Kiki? That's a boba, right? If I show you this sharp thing, you're going to say, oh, that looks like a Kiki.
That's a Kiki.
Same thing in Chinese. A bubble in Chinese is called a papa. And in English, it's called a bubble. Like they both have the same sounds. So what I'm saying here is that the phonos themes are really a really strong basis in learning foreign languages. So when I come, how do I use Glossika? I know we're running out of time here. I'd love to go on all these tangents, but I try to focus on the sounds of the language. I have a built-in mechanism for like error correction, and I don't have to deal with like fossilization. So I tend to correct myself over time. I'll hear myself say things wrong and I'll fix it immediately. It's how I got very good with speaking Chinese to begin with. So I'll hear my tone come out wrong and I'll just, let me say that again. Because the person listening to me is just like, oh, and then their face just like confirms what I just said correctly. So I have this kind of built-in correcting mechanism. So I just plow through languages. I just plow through them and I stay open to like, I might be saying this wrong. I don't care. I'm just going to keep acquiring as much of this language. So when I come across these random sentences, what I like to do is I like to say, okay, how many words of this sentence can I actually understand? Okay, so I can work out this, and this, and this, and this. Maybe the syntax gets me. It's just like, man, I don't understand this word order. This is like killing me. But I'll look at the English like, okay, so this English, it has this meaning. In this target language, it has this meaning. Somehow the syntax conveys that meaning somehow. And what I think about is this. I'm not going to spend time or effort trying to figure out why at all. I'm going to do another 100 sentences, another 1,000 sentences, and sometime between now and then, that's going to click in my head. Because with that mass amount of input, and when I don't understand something, look back at the English, okay, so why, I can ask why all day long, but it doesn't matter if I answer the why or if I look in a grammar book. But what's more important is, am I actually absorbing it? Okay, so this is how they say it. And no matter how often I say why, that's just how it is. It's like you ask somebody in English, like, why did you use an EN on the end of the verb taken? You're like, that's just how we say it, bro.
Yes.
You could explain it to them.
Explicit knowledge.
You could explain the passive to them all day long, all month long, all year long. They're still not going to get it, unless that's something that they're completely based in. They have a foundation in. And so the why doesn't really even matter. The point is that does a 5-year-old grasp this and say it like this? They can't explain it to you. I mean, the best thing to do is go ask a 5-year-old, why do you say it like that? Mom says it like that.
I don't know.
So the point is that if a 5-year-old can use it, why can't I? I'm underperforming a 5-year-old. A 5-year-old has spoken 1 million sentences in their short little life, and they're outperforming me in this language. It's not about how many big democratic constitutional words that I know how to say in this language. It's about, can I speak as well as a 5-year-old to begin with? And I'll move on from there. Can I get to an 8-year-old's level? So the point is that I don't want to,
bog myself down with too many grammar explanations. I'll have a question every now and then. I'll go look up a word. I'm like, oh, I love Wiktionary. I'll just look it up. I can see the history of the word. I can see what it's related to.
The pronunciation and IPA. Wiktionary is great. I'm also a huge fan.
So I'll use a tool and I'll use it fast and I'll close it fast and I'll get back to my reps. Just like what you said, you'll do 2 hours of reps. I'm kind of the same thing. I'll go out walking. I'll get my steps in for the day and I'll get my reps in for the day. And that's beside my gym workout, but it's just like, for me, that's really important. I got to get up in the morning and I got to get those done so that I can do everything else I got to do in the day. And it's just something that, it's just like, show up, do your reps. And I've got this to show for it. I mean, I've come a long way in life and I've achieved a lot of things. And, someday I might be speaking a Dravidian or a Turkic language or Uralic language or Bantu language, but it just needs time. I already speak multiple Semitic languages, Austric, Southeast Asian languages, and so they start to solidify over time, and it becomes more and more natural to use them. But I'm not in a position where I want to force it, like, I have to do this by December, and I have to do this by a certain date. I don't like those deadlines. It's like I just need to keep working at it, and it just becomes a way of life. It's sort of like if your goal is to become a millionaire in life. Oh, I'm going to become a millionaire by July 1st. Well, it doesn't really work like that. You have to build in habits. You got to do those habits every single day and work on it. And over time, you're going to see that start to grow and go up over time and grow at a faster rate. So with language learning, I think it's the same thing. It's a marathon. You have to build the daily habits. You got to show up and do your reps every single day. I mean, if you're in sales, it's the same thing. You show up, you write your emails, you do your phone calls, you do your meetings or whatever, and you do 5 of them every day, or you do 20 of them every day, whatever it is, and you do them with consistency, and 6 months later, you've made however much, sales or whatever. It's the same thing with everything in life. You want that 6-pack abs, show up and do your reps every day. And in 3 months, you'll have them. Depends where you start out at. If you start out overweight, it's not going to be 3 months. But
right.
What I'm saying is that you have to. It's just really it's a philosophy and it's a way of life. And so I think that if there's anything that I want to deliver to your listeners as the founder of Glossika, is that we provide this gym set, this tool set for you to use. You can do the dictation if you want. You can just do the listening and repeating if you want. That's what I like to do. I like to hear the sentence, I like to repeat it and have it recorded. And I can go back through and listen to my recordings over time and hear how, my pronunciation is improved. Or I can hear my pronunciation, man, that sucks. Let me record that one again. And so everybody has their own way of using it. We got the spaced repetition built in, and there's different algorithms that you can set up in the settings. Like I want to do the most recent items first, or I want to do those later, or I want to do the weakest items first. The whole thing is just a big gym set. So it's really how you want to use it. So those are my closing remarks. And I think the randomness of the sentences for me is the biggest advantage. Like I don't have any crutch. It's like, it's really testing me right off the bat. Like when I go back and I do my reps later, what I like to do is, I like to, for example, if I have the, if I'm working on Thai, for example, I'll have the whole sentence in Thai. I'm like, okay, I've done this one before. I know what it means. I can, now let's say I'm going to say this. Let's say I just look at the English. Can I replicate this sentence? Can I translate it into Thai? Can I say it how the Thai person says it? Or let me change the scenario. Instead of saying, oh, I'm ordering a coffee, let me say I'm going to order a cold tea or an iced tea or something like that. Change a couple words in the sentence, or maybe change the person that I'm talking to, and then try to say, the answer's not right there on the screen, of course, but it's just like, I play games with myself to kind of like juggle things around. You don't always need everything spelled out for you. I mean, language learning is all about having that ability to manipulate in your mind. So Glossika just gives you that base, that here's the base pattern. There's a lot of linguistics we put into behind the scenes with the sentence patterns and all that. Like, I think you had a question for me earlier was like, how do we come up with the sentences? And, there's
and
we've done
I
our
have an
homework.
idea.
We've done our homework in how to develop all of
That
these.
was
And
a
so,
question that was given to me by our community, and that's one that I actually know the answer to. Is you've done your homework, and these different sentences show you the difference between "I drank" versus "I have drunk." They're chosen to teach you the syntax and how different types of past tense function differently, and things like
but
that.
there's a caveat with that, though, is that you can't go through every single vocabulary in the language and do that. So there's a handful of those, and then we move on. It's just like, so you get a feel for like, okay, here's how you what does that one author use? She used the transformation, I guess, kind of like a transformation drill, a little DLI.
Yeah, because Glossika, it used to be promoted, and this is how I still promote it to people when I say go try Glossika, is a syntax trainer. You have all of these sentences, and if you learn all, 7,000, 8,000 that are for your language, you'll have a pretty good foundation of sort of like ad-libs, right? Being able to say things and then you switch out the grammar, or you switch out the vocab, but you know how certain phrases are constructed. And that's how I usually pitch Glossika to people, as a syntax trainer.
Yeah, I haven't spoken German in like 20 years. And every now and then, I'm back in Germany for some reason or the other, and I have to use the language. And it's basically, well, I'm going to sit down, I'm going to run through about 1,000 sentences of rep training, and I hit the ground running. It's just like, I just need to pull it out. I just need to pull that syntax, because like your brain already has all the connections in it that you built at a younger age. And so you've already used the language in the natural setting before. You've just forgotten. They've just become like buried in the sandstone. And it's just like, well, I need to go dredge up these connections that I used to have. And it really takes almost no effort, like a day or two in the country, or doing 1,000 reps. Maybe if you got enough time, maybe 10,000 reps, in the couple of weeks before you go. Everything just comes flooding back. You're probably not going to remember all the vocabulary, especially more advanced stuff. But like most of that vocabulary, if you've used it ever in a conversation before, you know it. It's there. And so what Glossika does is really builds these syntactic connections these neural connections in your mind, so that if you've done 25,000 reps in this language, or you've done 50,000 reps in this language, and you only spent 6 months of your life on this, you could literally put it down, walk away for 20 years. And let's say you're learning Hungarian or Turkish. Come back to Turkey in 20 years from now, do 1,000 reps of Turkish, and you hit the ground running. I'm serious. Like that's kind of like the idea, is like, how many languages can I learn and then forget just as quickly? But then at some point in the future, I can just go run through 1,000 or 2,000 reps, and boom, it can all come flooding back to me, and I can go hit the ground running. That's kind of the idea, is like, I just have like a Google Translate in my pocket, but it's in my head. I've got the thing in my head now, and it's great because every time I see something written in that language, even if it's in German in the last 20 years, I do read things every now and then. I can understand it. It's like, cool. That's written in a foreign language, and I understand it. And I never use the language all that much. So if that's a skill you want to acquire, the thing is, AI and all of these things are getting much more advanced. They can do all the work for us. But it's a great feeling to have that innate ability. I don't feel like a dumb guy. There's a lot of things that I'm very dumb at. I don't have like an exceptional intelligence in anything in particular. So it's to have this ability makes me feel good. I can have conversations with people on the fly wherever I'm at, and it's a great feeling. So anyway, I'll leave you guys with that. There's one other story I wanted to tell you real quick before I leave.
Sure.
Many of you are familiar with Richard Simcott, and Richard Simcott shared with me something. I asked him, how is it that that your daughter was able to learn multiple languages growing up all at the same time? And I think there's some people and families that use Glossika as well with their children, and so you can kind of filter the content for them.
Here at Refold. Yeah, she's got her daughter doing the dictation, not the dictation, just the deep mode. So,
but Richard
sure there are
says something that kind of made me think a little bit on that, because I had never heard that before. He said that he deliberately never used the name of the language he was speaking with his daughter for as many years as possible. He would never say, let's speak Spanish. He would never use the name of the language in English or in Spanish, or she speaks French as well in many languages. But the point is that he starts speaking a language with her and would not identify the speech as not giving it a name. By not giving it a name, it just remained that more natural. I was just like, wow, that's really fascinating. Like, we have to name everything. We have to name the way that we speak. But what if there was a famous linguist, Langacker, I believe, and he said, can you imagine a unicorn with daisies growing out of its nose? Can you? You want to know the name of it? No, I don't. Like, we don't have to give a name for everything. One of the things that we do on Glossika is try to avoid nouns. Like, I'm going to teach you a lot of verbs and active communicative, function words and fewer nouns. And I believe that Steve Kaufman at Link says the same thing. I think I've heard him say it. I agree with him completely, is that, you need function words. The nouns, it's just like the mass media. You're going to pick it up. It's all going to come flowing in over time. You'll learn what a unicorn is. 独角兽in Chinese. Like, I don't even have to memorize that word. It's like, I've heard it, I understood it, and then after a certain amount of time, I can say it too. It's like, okay. Oh, and there's that word again, show. It's related to the English word deer. Happens to be in that word. Interesting. Okay, so, so by not naming the language when you're speaking with your children, hey, let's learn Spanish. No, not a good thing to say to the child. Hablamos, how would you say in this way? I got my Italian mixed in with my Spanish, tanto così. But
así, I think, in Spanish.
Así, yeah, hablamos okay, so hablamos así.
Yep, speak this way. Don't name the way.
In this way. Your Spanish probably better than mine.
I could talk about this, and I know you could too, because like if you look at a lot of indigenous languages, their name for the language is usually something like the language or the language of the people, them being the people, of course. So for sure, I think there's something to it. Mike, thank you so much for coming on this week. This is going to be a killer episode. And yes, it was awesome. I've been a fan. I remember, well, I don't want to keep you. I remember, well, I'm going to say it. I remember when I was like a little wannabe polyglot, I was going to international school. It was my first time leaving the rural South. And you were one of the first like big linguist polyglot YouTubers. I remember watching you when you were like 10 years younger, and your wife beater, you'd go in the jungles of Taiwan, you'd be all sweaty and you'd be talking language, and you would be talking about your method. You used to go through and like memorize phrase books and repeat them to yourself. And you were very hardcore. And at that time, I had not even begun my journey learning languages, but you were an OG. You were very impactful on my life. I now work for a language company, and I
don't know what an OG is.
Original gangsta. The OG. Original gangsta. Original gangsta.
Oh, okay. Okay. So I actually did go up and I learned the Aboriginal language on site. With I couldn't live there month after month, but I would go spend weekends, maybe a week at a time, living with people there. So yeah, I have learned a language in the environment. At that time, there was no standardized writing system, not many materials written down for learning the language, let alone dictionaries. But the point is that it's possible. If you have kind of a systematic way of like, how I'm going to approach this, how am I going to elicit like motions and actions with this native speaker, and you bring them gifts and you drink tea together and you chat and you bring your recorder And so you just ask him like basic sentence building structures, and then he starts, ask him, tell me about the time when something happened from a long time ago, and he just tells you a story. And that might be off topic, but it's like that story can become literature that you can transcribe and figure out the words to. And it's a tough process, but I think that going through that process taught me a lot about language learning that you could never learn from a book or systematic learning from a course book, because you're kind of just working on building out how do I build out these structures in my mind, and you're listening it from a native speaker. And there's some things that you ask them that they just don't say, and so you have to kind of work your way around. Okay, so I might have this internal dialogue with myself in English or in Chinese, but that's just not something that they have an internal dialogue with. So like there's a phrase in Japanese that if you say, oh, you should do something, or you have to do something, it's like nakareba narimasen. It's a really long phrase, and people just they don't talk like that. They don't have that internal dialogue. It's not something that they say, but if I say I should do something in Georgian, I can use the unda immediately. It's just like that's part of an internal dialogue that I built up over time for specific languages. But the nakareba narimasen just doesn't roll off the tongue. Maybe if you haven't done your reps, but.
All right, and Mike, thank you so much. This has been a fantastic podcast. And maybe there will be a part 2. I enjoyed it thoroughly. Thank you so much. And
yeah, let me know what you'd like to talk about. We could follow up. Great talking to you guys.
I want to thank you for listening to this episode of the Refold Podcast. If you're watching the live premiere, you're in luck. Right as it ends, we have an after party over on the Refold Central Discord server. Come join us by using refold.link/join to chat about the episode. If you enjoyed the podcast and would like to hear more, you can find older episodes to listen to on YouTube and Spotify. Let us know what you thought about the video by liking and leaving a comment below. Do you have suggestions for upcoming visitors or requests for particular topics? Please feel free to reach out to me on Discord at GeorgePig #5413 or via email at clayton@refold.la. Thank you all for watching and or listening, and I'll see you next week.
Hey, as you know, there's a lot of language learning advice out there, which can make it kind of overwhelming and difficult to actually get going on your own learning. If you feel like you're struggling to figure out language learning, you're not alone. It's an extremely complicated process with tons of different steps. If you're looking for a step-by-step guide to create the perfect language learning routine for you, then you have to check out our new course. We spent thousands of hours designing a simple and straightforward process that you can use to create your own personalized language routine that actually works. We understand that every learner is different and that you have to roll with the punches and adapt. Every day for 30 days, I walk you through everything you need to know to build an effective learning routine, no matter your circumstances. We give you the advice and resources you need to ensure your success, so you don't have to waste time looking for stuff to do and can focus on learning. And if any questions do come up, don't worry. We are always there to answer any questions and clear up confusion. And it's all backed by our 90-day, no questions asked, money-back guarantee. If, for whatever reason, something's not quite working for you, we insist you get every penny back. It's time for you to stop wishing that you could learn a second language. It's time to become the master of your language learning journey. Check out the link below to get instant access and start your journey today.